We're talking about the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. And joining us from Ramallah in the West Bank is the Deputy Commissioner for Political Affairs and spokesman for the Fatah Commission for International Affairs, Dr. Husam Zomlot. Doctor, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, I'd like to play you this sound from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who basically accuses Hamas of the civilian tragedy that's unfolding in Gaza.
Hamas is deliberately targeting our civilians. They've fired 2,000 rockets at Israel's cities. 75% of our population has to be in bomb shelter alert of 60 seconds or 90 seconds. What Hamas is doing very cynically is embedding its rocketeers, its rocket caches, its tunnels, these terror tunnels, in homes, in hospitals, in schools. And when we take action, as targeted as we can, they then use their civilians as human shields.
Your reaction to that, sir?
Well, blaming the victim is something we are familiar with as far as Israel is concerned. They have been blaming us as the Palestinians, the Palestinian people, since Israel was founded in 1948. It was founded on the skulls of our nation. Two-thirds of our people lost their homes and lost their livelihoods when Israel was established. It has been very well documented by international scholars, by Israeli scholars and by Israeli politicians, the mass expulsion and the ethnic cleansing that happened to our people. And ever since then, time in and time out, every other week we have a crisis, and Israel again does it and blame the victim. No, sir, I think Mr. Netanyahu has got it right deliberately. The rockets of Hamas have been condemned by us, and the violence in general is condemned by us. Luckily, these 2,000 rockets did not really kill any Israeli civilian. There was one Israeli soldier affected by it. But the numbers of Palestinian children, women, elderly, is speaking the truth. I mean, and Israel is claiming they are not targeting civilians. What about the Human Rights Watch report that came out only 3 days ago, stating very clearly that Israel does target civilians? So you kill all these people right in front of cameras, live on CNN and on major news like yours, all over the world, kids playing on the beach, families wiped out totally, and you say that it's Hamas to blame. This is unacceptable. I think Israel, as an occupying force in full control of the Gaza Strip and the occupied Palestinian territories, that is the West Bank and East Jerusalem, is responsible under international law to protect these captive civilians under its authority. And I believe today international accountability, international system is at stake. If we don't bring Israel to accountability, I think our international system, our universal values, even our humanity will be indeed dented.
Well, Israel went into Gaza because of these rockets that you and the Palestinian Authority have condemned. They've also discovered 16 tunnels. You agree there's no justification for these rockets, whether they kill anyone or not, and these tunnels as well?
There is no justification for violence, sir, but if we get lost in the details of a tit for tat, then we lose the big picture, and we must put things into perspective. The situation here is that of a full military occupation by Israel, coupled with sweeping colonization of the Palestinian occupied territories on every day. That is illegal according to international law, that is illegal according to the US government and the rest of the world.
You know, let's focus on what's achievable here. Can we get a ceasefire in the coming days? You obviously in communication with Hamas at the Palestinian Authority. What are their demands? What are they prepared to accept to stop the violence?
Those are not the demands of Hamas. Those are the demands of the Palestinian people. The Gaza people have been put under siege for 9 years. 9 years. This siege has seen Gaza really going back almost to the dark ages, to the Stone Age. People are not allowed to travel. People are not allowed to have normal, ordinary work. Basic materials are not allowed in. There is a total closure from the air, from the land, from the sea. The Israeli officials on public said that they calculate the calories of the Gazans to barely live and survive. This is unbelievable, unbearable. So this collective punishment is a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. So if the demands is to lift siege, with war or without war, with all these discussions, it's a birthright for people to have the right to move.
you are basically saying that we could see a ceasefire if Israel stops the blockade, both from the Israeli side and from the sea, which was, of course, part of a ceasefire agreement in 2012. Israel would argue that Hamas did not live up to the ceasefire. There's also a demand by Hamas of release of prisoners. Does that have to be met as well?
And Israel, yes, exactly, Nathan. In 2012, there was a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, which, in my opinion, Hamas has adhered to, and Israel did not implement much of its provisions. Israel did not lift the siege of Gaza for all these years. Israel did not release the prisoners that was agreed to. So what guarantees do we have? What guarantees if we again go for a truce and a ceasefire, and then Israel doesn't provide? I think now is the time that we seek what we are doing. We seek international protection.
Dr. Zomlot, speaking of captured soldiers, it's been confirmed in the last 24 hours that an Israeli soldier was captured by Hamas. As in previous captures, do you see this as a potential breakthrough for a ceasefire, the return of the Israeli soldier, perhaps for the release of Palestinian prisoners?
The soldier is the symptom. The situation in Gaza right now, the mayhem, the murder, the agony, the slaughterhouse in Gaza, the madhouse in Gaza is only the symptom. We must always remember that there is a root cause of all this, which is the denial of the Palestinian collective and individual rights. And if this is a moment really when we have the Secretary General of the United Nations visiting us today in Ramallah and earlier in Israel, and we have the Secretary of the State in Cairo, John Kerry, and we have half of the world intervening, this is the time to really put this on a political track, to say enough is enough. This is about time to save Israeli lives and Palestinian lives. This is about time to apply international resolutions. That's all about it. It's about international resolutions that have been endorsed by the United States, by the 5 superpowers in the UN Security Council resolution, international consensus. The Palestinians are not seeking something that is away or outside the international consensus. That's why I'm trying my best not to be lost in the details of the very particular moment, except saying that even, Nathan, even wars have rules, and Israel has provoked and violated the very basic rules of the game. And Israel claims to be a state. Hamas might be a group, this individual that, but a state must act like a state.
Sorry, can I just cut you off there? Because it is worth reminding ourselves where this conflict began. I want to play you this sound from John Kerry, a US Secretary of State, and get your reaction to whether this is where this current conflict began.
When 3 young Israeli kids are taken and murdered, and Hamas applauds it and celebrates the fact that they were kidnapped and supported the kidnapping, and then starts rocketing Israel when they're looking for the people who did it, you know, that's out of balance by any standard, George. And I think it's important for people to remember the facts that led to this. Hamas needs to join up, be part of a solution, not the problem.
Was the murder of 3 Israeli boys the beginning of this crisis, and the blood started with Hamas?
Well, I think Mr. Kerry has got some of the facts incorrect, really. And if you're talking about matter of sequence, do we have Hamas here in the West Bank? We don't. And the Israeli attacks started here. In less than 10 days, they killed 11 Palestinians, mostly children, by the way, and civilians. And they wreaked havoc everywhere they went, in Hebron, in Nablus, in Jerusalem. And you all have followed the burning of a Palestinian child in Jerusalem only 3 weeks ago by a Jewish rabbi and his kids. So this is not about only Hamas. And Hamas was founded only 25 years ago. Before Hamas, this same situation existed and prevailed here. This is about this ideology and this power that Israel believes could protect it without having to give up and to really address the real grievances and the real rights of the Palestinian people. So to blame only one side is a very one-sided, and we are growing really familiar with the US bias in this whole situation. I think Mr. Kerry knows it more than anybody else, that the situation is really that of Israeli colonization, that is of Israeli illegalities on the ground, that is of Israeli continued insistence insistence on supporting the settlement policy rather than the peace process. He himself had led the initiative to try and bring peace to this part of the world, and he himself have affirmed that the Israeli government has really blocked the way. The last sentence I just want to say that today your task as international media is very important, just to reveal the reality and the truth on the ground.